Welcome to Artkyk. This is Urvija.
And this is Yamini. We love to talk about art.
So do join us as we share our insights of this world with you. Hi, Yamini.
Hi, Urvija.
So today we have quite an interesting subject to talk about, which we have spoken of in the past, but kind of captured our conversation a few days ago. So we thought we'd take it forward in a podcast as well. What are installation works, and how is that different from a traditional sculpture or media such as that?
That's actually quite a vast topic, and to kind of put it in a very simple, basic manner, we understand sculpture is something that's three-dimensional, something that's made of materials such as stone or wood, brass, bronze, any of the metals, that's fixed in a particular location, and that you could walk around it. Yeah, or it could be something that's put on a wall also. Now, when it comes to installation, and because the word is used as installation sculpture, that's where it starts getting confusing because the name itself is not very clear. Because the word install means that you put something in there. And if I were to explain it in layman's term, it just simply means that instead of using a traditional permanent material to be fixed in a particular location, and that could be on its own, an installation is something that stretches the space that is occupied by the sculpture. It could include, non-permanent things, and it definitely includes a larger space. It means that something that you experience. The other way of saying it is that installation sculpture is more experiential and forces the viewer to not be a passive interaction, but move around the work, move into the work, be surprised by, oh, is that material, a work of art? Does that make sense?
No, I think it's a really interesting definition, and it kind of covers some of the key things we've been talking about. I think this whole concept of installation and why it's interesting and also confusing is because what you said was very interesting to me, that it stretches the space and makes it different experience for the viewers. The whole idea of an installation is the interaction with the viewer, a constant interaction, and be it a temporal interaction. But that interaction is essential for an installation to be deemed as such, as compared to passive, viewing of, say, Michelangelo's David or something like that.
So why don't we just kind of do, 2 examples or 3 examples so that our listeners get a better sense of what we're talking about. What you were referring to earlier, Urvija, you want to talk about Christo and the most recent thing that is
Yes, I think that's part of where our discussion started because, a couple of months ago, I think it was late November, after Christo's death, his last piece of work was unveiled, which was, the covering of Arc de Triomphe.
It's interesting, unveiled, but it was covering of a monument.
Yes, I know, it's a pun, reverse pun on that such a word. It was very true to the artist's way of working, which was taking, a large public space, a well-known public space, and redefining its viewership or, looking at it. And he, he's done this he had done this in the past by covering other spaces as well. And he sort of really mastered that genre. And we got us into a conversation of, is that an installation? Is that a performance? How does that stretch the boundaries of a viewer? But we realized that any installation that engages in that fashion would be termed an installation and would have that, would be able to hold that.
Correct. And also the other thing is that the reason I think why artists prefer an installation is because it again pushes the boundary. When you want to have a conversation going, when you want people to question what is that work of art, how do you do it? I think of an example, one of my earlier experiences or first instance of engaging with an installation was Vivan Sundaram's work. It was in Jahangirat which was exhibited in Jahangir Gallery in the early 90s. And I was like, oh my God, how is that? Or what is it? So he had a, I'll take 2 minutes to describe the work.
Yeah,
So there
yeah.
was a painting which was hung on the wall. It had a sheet of paper, white paper, that was extended onto the floor. And on the floor was a tray that was full of water and, a slim tray of water and had pieces of charcoal. And the drawing was also of charcoal.
Mm.
And then I realized that it's not water, but engine oil, and the work was called as engine oil, water, and charcoal. It was quite something for me to see that, oh, is it a painting? It's not a
Mhm.
sculpture, it's not permanent. That's the other thing, which also comes up in Christo's work, the non-permanence of things. And interestingly,
Yes.
when he had his retrospective, which was cut back to after 20 years, the same work was reinstalled in that manner. So what it means is that though it's, for some works, though it's temporary and it has that quality which is like, oh, it can go away at any time, but at the same time, your mundane materials literally add. So if he's talking about charcoal, it's a charcoal painting, but there's also actual charcoal in there. I think that is the fun of installations, or
The
that's the
fascination we
power of
have with it.
installation. Correct. To take it that one step beyond and make it into an engaging conversation or an engaging piece.
Is the
You
idea
know,
of being able to reimagine a space, be it large or confined to a room, etc., and the diversity of the material and the overlapping of the genre that you can do, that's what also keeps this dynamism.
yes, absolutely. Or the other example that I can think of, so it's going to go back and forth between what is happening in our space and what's happening otherwise also. When you talk about Olafur Ellison's, works where he had that thing in Tate, the Turbine Hall, it was a sunset, the blazing sun, and all people did was walk into that space, enjoy a sunset, a sunrise. Of course, there are multiple messages, which is about climate change, about how do people have time to stop and engage in that space. The whole fact that it was a enclosed space, and you had a sunset regardless of the time of the day. So shifting the concept of time, and that's, I think, the power of installations, that it makes it that much more in your face, and it
The
disturbs your.
intensity of an experience, of a
Correct.
spatial
It
experience.
heightens, yeah, it
Yeah.
heightens it. It emphasizes it also. Also, the other way that I could look at it is, again, Urvaja, something that both of us
Mm.
saw before pandemic,
Yeah.
and where we could go to exhibitions.
Mm.
At the KNMA, where Jayashree Chakravarti had one room was of her work, and
Yes.
you literally walk. Do you remember that
Yes,
experience when
and
you
there
just
were these really fine spaces, but they were very dense at the same time.
correct? And they were made of her work, which was paper.
Yeah.
And she had turned paper into a sculptural form. It was just a beautiful experience. You walked into a darkened space. It was lit, very dramatically,
Mm.
and it had these beautiful forms of the flora and fauna.
And it was points of discovery when you said, "Oh, look at this, look at that." That
Yeah,
it was so fine, but the experience was so intense. That's why I ended up using the word dense, but may or may not be the right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And here's a different aspect of an installation where she's working with the traditional material. It is still a work on paper, but the
Mm.
way she presented the work, or the work was conceived, did not make the paper in a frame, but the paper became a space, sculptural, larger,
Mm.
and forced you to walk into it. And it kind of overwhelmed, surrounded you completely. So that's another way of installation. It doesn't necessarily have to be with different materials or temporary materials, but the material itself is presented in a different way.
Taking that conversation a step further, why do
Mm.
you think that artists are increasingly using this format for representation of their artistic abilities? And do we see that as a form that's going to become more and more in the public sphere?
I think the answer to that is, yes, in a way, I'm going to use a very kitsch analogy over here, nothing to
Mm,
the art world. People may not like it. Imagine an installation like a showstopper of a fashion show. All your ideas that the artist has to say, everything that he
mm,
wants to communicate, comes through that one intense experience that
mm,
shakes the viewer, that gets the message across emphatically. And while he continues to do the other works, so the
mm,
installation kind of becomes the key, the highlight of the entire body of work. And it's a way to get people to respond. And I think that's what an artist wants, right? That people
mm.
should react to it, they should respond to it. And also,
Yeah.
there's the whole thing of, let's not forget it's art, and, there are artists who are their own identities, want to have that flamboyant presence, something that people can take back and talk about. You may not remember everything, but the
Mm.
experience sticks with you. I think
And
that's the
also in the space of social media and digital world, it creates a point of conversation much more than a traditional piece of art might have.
correct. And then there's literally no limit of the choice of materials that you have. There's literally no boundary of saying that what is possible and what can be included and what needs to be excluded. It's like having an endless palette, an endless supply of
Mm.
materials that can be incorporated into the world of your sculpture. Think
Yeah.
about it like, why, as kids, how we get excited about doing a collage and you get to tear up paper and stick and make
Mm.
something new. Here, it's a slightly more evolved and a more conscious way of thinking and creating something interesting.
No, very interesting. I thought that was encapsulated some of the discussions we've been having, and increasingly a lot of the works that we come across, or works that capture our talking points. I wouldn't say imagination, but talking points. It's going to be, you're right, a dynamic space will continue to grow. There might be so many other, media that keeps getting attached to it. The video formats, slides have become a really popular installation medium, and many more, I would imagine, as we continue to see.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, I think it was great. It helps formulate a lot of ideas and bring clarity. And I hope our listeners enjoyed, this discussion about what is installation, and hopefully can come back with more ideas on that.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Urvaja. Bye.
You were listening to Artkyk, where we share personal views on subjects in the art world.
For more such content, please visit our website www.artkyk.com. That's ARTKYK. Keep listening.